Good morning and welcome to Finance and Technology Insights. Eric Buhrendorf is here. I'm Brian Williams. We're ready for another episode 7, right? I always lose track. I think we're on 7 here. Eric, a little bit under the weather early this week, so let's find out. Let's see how he's doing. How you feeling?
Hey, buddy. Yeah, as I was saying during the countdown, full man flu in effect over here. I'm sucking it up because things have to get done. But if I had it my way, I would be under a blanket on the couch. I'm crazy enough to think that it's not COVID. Sorry, let me just quit that. Because we're doing everything we can to avoid it, and I work from home, so I don't know. I had a 100-degree fever on Sunday. No chills or anything. Didn't lose my taste or smell, but just a little achy. So I don't know. I don't know. Quite frankly, I don't know. I'm not a fan of the winter anymore. So
Yeah.
It could, what sad is? Seasonal afflicted disorder.
Yeah. I have a bigger issue with the darkness more than anything else.
Oh,
I always tell my wife that a couple weeks in November, after the time change between that and Thanksgiving, I'm useless. Like those weeks really bother me. Once it gets to Thanksgiving and you set up for Christmas, and it's like, we have I don't know, 8 or 9 Christmas trees in the house. So it's like brighter, but those couple weeks before Thanksgiving are tough.
I don't envy that because I'm actually good until the second week of January. I'm, as the cool kind of comes in, it's like, the air is crisp. We're just going from Halloween to Thanksgiving to Christmas, and that whole 3-month period at the end of the year is it's distracting enough and kind of new enough. But after January, the first week or second week of January, I just know that it's 4 more weeks of just freezing or near freezing weather. I just want to be outside. I want to feel the sun, go for walks and do that, all that stuff. So yeah, I just, so I don't know if it's man flu, corona, or SAD, seasonal afflicted disorder, but somewhere I'm in that funk. But fortunately, we're going to Cancun, hopefully in the second week of February for a week. And I'm really looking forward to that, hoping that there's no logistical challenges with the airlines or anything like that.
Anybody else in the house sick or just you?
No, my 2 girls are fine. My wife's fine. My dad's fine. So that's, that's 5 of us in the house, and, the girls in and out of school. And, like I said, it kind of set in around Sunday, and, we didn't do anything, overexposed or anything like that. And the girls are fine. Everybody's fine. So that's why I don't think it was corona. And like I said, I work from home. I don't really go out much per se. So I don't know, but I'm sucking it up, but that's why, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, you sound all right. That's all that matters, right? If you're doing a podcast, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I appreciate the flexibility in the recording. Sorry to everybody out there who expects a rigid release schedule. I know our vast audience out there has high expectations for a tight release schedule. So, but I appreciate your flexibility, and I'm sorry I feel like I keep moving the goalposts on you.
Yeah, it got pretty bad here Monday morning around 10 o'clock. I had to pull all the shades down on the windows, and I had people looking in and banging on the door, demanding an episode. And I kind of had to beat them away with a stick, but just comes with the territory, right?
Yeah. So just to give everybody some context of last week's episodes, I don't know if it's coming across on this episode or not, but I did get a new camera. It's a 4K camera. We're still kind of working out the recording of the video, but we did get the podcast out last week, right?
Yep. Yeah. And that's to me, I think that's the most important thing, right? The consistent audio version of it. I think that'll probably pick up more so than the video, maybe the video later on. But I think we've had
Yeah.
more downloads and more subscribers on the audio side, which is fine with me. It doesn't matter to me where they come from. The audio is just, or the YouTube stuff is just kind of a bonus, right? I think, at least in my opinion for now.
I'm kind of split in the middle. When it's TV time, I'm all YouTube, to be honest. And when it's all, when I'm driving or doing kind of multitasking work, it's all podcasts. So I'm happy to get it out both, but we're still ironing out the kinks, and you and I keep talking about what it's going to be like after year 2 or year 3 of the look back, and see how young and foolish we were, and all the tech and process for getting a production out. Let's just say the guys who've been doing it out there for a long time, guys and girls who've been doing it for a long time, they make it look easy, but it definitely had to come with experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're probably the type, we're always going to push it technology and feature wise anyway. So I'm okay with that. I'd rather push it a little bit and always try to improve. And, if you have to take 5 steps forward and 1 back, sometimes I'm okay with that. Cause you want to continue to push it. We could obviously just set up some crappy cameras and just a couple of crappy microphones and be fine for, 2 or 3 years, but that's not what we're going to do. So continue to push it.
I gotta say, I mentioned this last time, and I think you teased me as if I was hurting your feelings. I hope that's not the case, but in a way, I kind of look forward to the time where we might not regularly necessarily, but start having guests.
Yeah,
I think that'd be really a funny dynamic, to bring in a third party equally as inexperienced as us, but maybe an expert in a subject matter field or something, and just have 3 knuckleheads here talking about something, and just seeing the expression and being a host of a guest. I've never been a host of a guest per se, so I think that would be funny at some point to do.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. I used to do before the pandemic, I was doing a lot more podcasting for myself, and I had a little interview show of local businesses, and those I was doing in person. I think for that kind of thing, it's better to be in person, especially if they're running a small business and you want to get a feel for their layout and their, physical location and all that kind of stuff. But it definitely does. There are certain guests you can just kind of ask one question and let them go. And then there's others that you sort of have to drag through it, which is okay. That's part of the fun, right? I mean, that's the way any show kind of is. You got to interview people to get to where you want to be. But yeah, that definitely is a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is fun. So what's new in business? What's new in Northshire Consulting this week? Last week?
Yeah, everything is always new and different. I had a meeting at a client's house last night at 5:30, which was nice. Those have been, few and far between the last couple of years. So much virtually, or kind of meeting at a neutral site, as I'll call it, coffee shop, library, that kind of stuff. But no, it was good to just be back out there. I mean, certain people, a lot of people who go through, they're raising a family and all this kind of stuff, and they let their stuff kind of go off to the side. So they come out with a stack of documents and that kind of stuff. And it's fun to just sort of go through that and miss that a little bit. So it was good to go out and do that again. About as low tech as you can get. But that's part of the fun. I like the balance of the back and forth.
What about business development? Any new tools or techniques or marketing effort or anything like that?
No, not since last time. I had my first in-person networking thing that was a little bit on hiatus during the holidays, and then with the Omicron push. So that was good to get back to that. We did a new location, new restaurant in town. So that was sort of fresh and different to get back to that. But
so like a leads group, like a BNI or chamber?
Yeah, it's just a local unaffiliated kind of networking thing, which is fun. The format's similar to some other groups where it's only one per profession, and you do a couple minutes on yourself, and and then you share some testimonials or whatever. But for me, it's not as much business development as just knowing people in town to get stuff done, because I know that if I need an electrician, I can
Right.
call the guy and he's going to be like, oh crap, I got to get there quickly and do a good job, or else he's going to, put me on blast in front of the whole group, so
Right.
he wants to do a good job for me so that I get up in front of the group and say how awesome he is. So, when you're got an air conditioner or furnace, or, something around the house that needs to get done and you need to get somebody, it's good to have that networking connection to get that stuff done.
Yeah, I built my business on those meetings. I
Mm-hmm.
did years and years and years of lead what do they call them? So lead passing networks. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
effectively BNI is one of the biggest ones, but every chamber, most effective chambers, have some function of that or some form of that, like a morning coffee kind of
Mm-hmm.
meetup once a week. I did
Yeah,
that
and
for so many years.
yep, yeah, different formats. Got to do a little bit of everything. I mean, a lot of those groups have gone fully virtual, or some have kind of split it. I like the business after hours ones as much as sometimes
Yeah.
the before. I mean, I'm not like a big drinker or anything like that, or going to go out and whatever, get loaded with a bunch of business people. But I do think there's an aspect to that, to just having a normal conversation versus having your elevator pitch, so to speak, which gets a little redundant after a while. But just getting to know people. That's one of the things we talked about this morning, is what do you want to do differently with the group? And everybody said their standard things. Well, I want to make sure I'm attending every meeting. I want to have more one-on-ones. And I was like, I just want to learn people's backstories, right? I'm a big backstory guy. Like, okay, great, you're an accountant, but why did you, what's your story? Why did that interest you? Or maybe it doesn't interest you and that's just what you do, and you're 50 years old and you're stuck in it, and you don't I think that's a story too. So I'm always kind of like, how does somebody end up doing something? That stuff
Yeah,
always
for sure.
fascinates me.
It's interesting when I look back at kind of my business history. I forget sometimes how much experience I have. I mean, I started my business, I think, almost 20 years ago, and yeah, I built my business and my reputation, at least locally, on chamber meetings, BNI groups, lead gen, lead passing groups. Then I kind of, if I fast forward a couple of years, it's interesting to see that those groups led me to peer groups, industry peer groups, and those were interesting. And I'm still in some of those, a couple peer groups, and um, joining a peer group is really interesting because you can actually see how quote unquote competitors, or people in your space, are running their business. So it's interesting that the joining the chamber meetings and the lead groups are nice because you're trying to grow business. But then joining a peer group is interesting because you can then learn how to run your business. Have you looked at any peer groups? Are you in
Yeah.
any peer groups?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few online networks that are good. So there's a group called XYPN that is more advisors for Generation X and Y. That's kind of how they got their niche. And it's a lot of solo advisors or small shops, a lot of independent folks like myself, which is great. It's mostly fee only, to nerd out a little bit, but it's like that non-commission world. It's not like a sales group. It's more of like the more of what I do, which is more of kind of a consulting nature versus product pushing. So those are great. And that forum is it's one of the few Facebook groups that's really a destination for me. Obviously you go through your feed and kind of scroll through and see what you see, but it's almost like once or twice a week I have to go to that group and, all right, sort of chronologically, and just go through and make sure I didn't miss anything. So yeah, I think those are great because you always get new people coming into the business, asking those sort of questions. You get new ideas, and peer groups are great. And what you find is, at least in my business, I don't know, I forget what the numbers are. I think it's like 90% of people don't have an advisor that they're working with or something like that. So you're not necessarily in competition with those people. It's like you're all collectively trying to get to those 90%, right? You're not fighting with them over the 10% that has advisors, to some extent
Right.
that you are, but it's more about growing that community and getting that collective message out there, especially, as a solo guy like me, to be able to tell these stories. And, I've talked to clients about that network too. Say, well, you're not really just getting me. If I get hung up on something, I got this whole network of people. And, as I grow my content, I've been on other people's podcasts from that group, and been on their YouTube channel, and vice versa, and all that stuff. So you do learn a lot from those peer groups, and it can potentially be a referral source back and forth too, because everybody has a niche of a niche of a niche, right? So if there's something that's not a good fit for somebody, it's good to be able to refer that to somebody.
Nice. That's cool. So this week, let's see what's new with me this week. Let's see. Oh, okay. So talk about groups. One thing that I do is I made jokes about this in the past on Facebook. I know you saw that, but I have the challenge of giving unsolicited advice all the time, and one way that I channel that is through product feedback. Personally, I rely on feedback from my clients. I mean, we it's so valuable to us to have positive and negative and neutral feedback from our clients. We always want to know what's working, what's not working. I always make my wife can almost see it on my face every time we go out to dinner and we get the check and there's no, feedback card. How do you run a service business without soliciting aggressively, not negatively aggressively, but, ambitiously feedback from your customers? Anyways, this morning, for example, I left a feedback. I just thought of a feature that I think we have Alexa, Amazon Alexas all over the house. And I thought about a feature that really they should have. There's this feature on the Alexa called the routines, where you can kind of code her to do things at various times and functions of around the house, like 8:30 in the morning, turn off the girls' bedroom lights or something. And I just thought, what they really needed there was a challenge and response feature where you can kind of code her to ask you, hey, do you want at 8:30 have Alexa ask you, do you want me to turn off the girls' room lights? And then it would be nice to code her if you say yes in response, turn them off. If no, then she doesn't do anything. So I was surprised to see that they don't have a feature like that. Anyways, so yeah, I'm always giving feedback, but one of the things that I'm doing, what I do often is I participate in the community. We have a key piece of software. We have a bunch of software that we use to run our business. But we have a key software that's kind of the centerpiece to our business, from which we conduct our business. And I participate in the community pretty actively. The vendor hosts a community, and actually there's a user group on Facebook as well, which is pretty active. And I contribute and participate in both of those communities, helping other users. And one of the things I do is I submit a lot of feature requests or feedback on the function of the software. And what I'm finding is they're very responsive to that. And I think that's wonderful. And last week I had a meeting. They asked for a meeting with me, the product development team and community manager. There's a feature that I think a very important feature that's missing from the software that we live without. I mean, we've been using the software for almost 10 years now, and we certainly have lived without this feature. But I have been kind of calling for this feature pretty loudly in the community and feature requests and things like that. And they pulled me into a meeting, or asked me for a meeting last week. Getting my days mixed up. I'm pretty sure it was last week. And they said, we can't promise you anything, but we want to show you something. And I said, okay. And the product manager did a screen share and showed me a draft version in place in a sample version of the software. And I fell out of my chair. Like literally I got up and I walked out of frame, and I came back and I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And, it's such a nerdy thing to be excited about a feature request coming to a piece of software, especially a piece of software that runs your business. But, I'm a business owner and CEO and manager, and we run a really high efficiency, high productive business with a very lean team, and we couldn't do it without a piece of software like this. So the better the software becomes, the better my company becomes. So that was kind of exciting for me. And I guess the giveaway, I don't know if I'm always trying to give a message or advice, right? I'm always trying to dispense advice. If there's any advice to give, that's what was going on with me. But if there's any advice I can share with any of our viewers that may manage or run a business, feedback is important. Giving feedback is valuable, and soliciting feedback is really valuable. Do you solicit feedback from your clients in any capacity?
I haven't yet. That's something that's kind of on the roadmap. Partially it's because, when I started my business, I had a certain model that I was going towards, and a lot of that has been restricted a little bit by COVID. So I feel like a lot of my newer clients haven't necessarily got the full experience.
Right.
So I think I'd like to run with my full experience the next 6 months or so, or something like that. Maybe do a client survey in the summer, because I think if I did one now, I'm pretty aware of the type of feedback I'd get. Not that it's necessarily bad. I've just shifted and done other things.
Right.
And I shared with you a client video that I did this week, because it was exactly that. I mean, I went into this client and took them on, February of 2020, right? So, and it was like, yeah, we're going to do these quarterly meetings. We're going to do, we're going to do all these things. I'm going to live in your break room. You say kind of things like that. And then they don't see you for 2 years. So it's like, all right, well, so we've had to shift. We've done a lot of video content, public stuff on my YouTube channel, and then some private stuff that, as plans change, we want to get those features out to the employees, and, investment changes, and you can't always do that in person. So I haven't solicited that feedback yet. Maybe I could do something that was like, what do you feel like is missing? That way I could see, all right, well, we're on the same page. The feedback I got isn't earth shattering, but it confirms the direction that I'm going. We could go do something like that. Yeah, I kind of want to get to the more,
Yeah, I can imagine if you're still building the house for somebody, and you're asking for feedback, and they're like, well, it'd be nice to have walls, maybe. Right. Yeah. So I don't know where you are in your process per se, so that may not be an apt comparison, but so I can appreciate that for sure. When you get there though, I was way late, way too late to building in a feedback loop in my business. Not that I didn't solicit feedback, I just didn't do it uniformly and automatically. So, in every business, there's transactions that are expectable transactions. So if you're going out to eat, that you're going to you're going to interface with a server, you're going to, have, you're going to get food and then get a bill, and there's kind of an expectable transaction in that business model. For us, we're a service provider, so we're very ticket based. So all of the inquiries and requests from our clients come in the form of a ticket. It's very email centric. We do have a client portal, but it's basically an email transaction kind of process. And we just built in a customer survey. So we have one of the software that I use has this thing called the service thermometer, which we implemented. And during the transaction of our service, every email we send to the client has a reference to the ticket we're emailing them from, and then it has like a happy face, a neutral face, and a sad face, and it says, give us real-time feedback. How are we doing? And if the client clicks on any of those, it kind of gives us real-time feedback on the service. And then, of course, when the ticket's done, we send an email saying, hey, we hope we delivered service according to your expectations. Would you mind giving us some feedback? And we have links to our Google reviews, our Facebook reviews, and an internal survey feature, which I ask 5 questions. Were we on time? Were we professional? Was your issue solved to your expectations? And do you want to follow up? And then I actually ask, what media or publications do you subscribe to regularly view? And that's my failed effort of trying to kind of do some market research so that we can, to maybe impact our marketing. Nobody ever answers that. So either nobody's watching YouTube or podcasts out there, or they just tired of that question. But what about product feedback? Do you ever, whatever tools you use to run your business, do you have a key tool that you use to run your business outside of maybe email or your phone or something? And you don't have to be specific because it might reveal any sort of proprietary processes, but do you have a key software that you use that has a community or a feedback feature that you've ever submitted to?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different things. So for individual clients, I'll either custody their accounts at Schwab or TD Ameritrade, who we're merging together, obviously, but they take feedback pretty well. But I think it's sort of like I was talking about before. They're not at full strength like a lot of other industries because they've had some difficulty hiring and things like that. So I'm sure a lot of their feedback is, I was on hold for an hour, you didn't do this, and so to that extent, it's probably not super helpful because they know all
Right.
that. From a software perspective, there is one key piece of software that I have that does have a pretty active suggestion forum. So you can go in and you can search for if somebody's asked for something. So a big thing with them is the connections to outside accounts, right? So part of it is an account aggregation tool that you can log in one spot and see all your accounts. So those connections are always breaking. Some of it's, 2-factor and all that kind of stuff, 2-factor authentication, but some of the connections they just don't have. So a lot of times people ask for those so you can go in and kind of one up their vote. You hit the thumbs up and it'll, so they keep track of the number of people looking for that feature. So I think that's fairly common, that concept of the forum and the bumping things up. I think that seems to work pretty well.
What about app reviews? When was the last time you did an app review?
Oh, an app review? Probably.
Yeah. Are you an iPhone user or an Android?
Android. Yeah.
So,
Android.
So that's the Google Play Store. You ever have like an app just not doing the thing you want it to do, and you go to the App Store and you start banging a review out?
No, I actually haven't done that. I think we said before, I'm kind of like the opposite. I'm assuming that if I'm having that problem, that millions and millions of other people have had that problem and they've already got that review. I'd be more likely to spend time on something that was more like industry specific or something,
right?
Which I don't use a lot of industry specific stuff on my phone, probably less than you do. But yeah, I'd be much more willing to give feedback on that kind of stuff. So the question I would have for you is, would you find it helpful to have a piece of software, either publicly or privately, kind of share their roadmap? Would that be helpful for you to kind of say, all right, I was going to suggest this, but it looks like they're on their, that looks like actually it's a Q3 target for them anyway? Interesting
question. So a lot of a roadmap for software development is actually it's not a new concept. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to say companies who don't publish a roadmap are less professional or less robust, but big software houses usually have some sort of roadmap or feature log that they publish publicly. So for that exact reason, kind of like if there's a glaring omission from a feature standpoint on a piece of software and the users are clamoring for it, if you publish a roadmap, you can kind of temper attitudes and the community if they're like, calling for this feature and you're like, okay, we heard you and now it's on the roadmap and here it is. The software that I use for to run my business, for example, the community has been calling for a roadmap, published roadmap for the last 10 years, and they just got to it. And they're a niche software, so they're nowhere near the scale of like a Microsoft or Intuit or something like that, but they got to it. But it required I would say it required the sum of every feedback left for that. So I'm kind of the feedback king, because in my experience it works. This meeting that I had with the product managers of the software that I use, in that meeting, they showed me a list of feedback suggestions and a pie chart. And when I looked closely, they were showing me I think it was like 130 feedback items or feature requests that I submitted. It was all data on me. They're like, so Eric, here's all of the feedback you left us. And the pie chart said, it was the one wedge was percentage of features implemented from Eric, features under review, and features not yet implemented. And they, and that one wedge that says features implemented, that's kind of why I started doing it. There's been over the last 10 or more years this real pivot in the software realm and service realm, where feedback is a driving force of product delivery and product development. And the Steve Jobs and Bill Gates era of Microsoft, for example, they were I don't want to criticize them negatively per se, but software kind of came up at a time where the nerds told the normals what they wanted, and then they would use it, or we would use it, so we would get Windows, and this is what they conceptualized and developed, and they gave it to us, and we were lucky to have it. That was, I don't know if you remember that or not, but that was really the nature of software development and service delivery in the past. This you just kind of were spoon fed what you got, and you got it. Bill Gates retired from Microsoft as the CEO, I think somewhere, I think 2005 or something like that. Then it was Steve Ballmer for a couple weird years, and then now it's Satya Nadella, and the culture is just completely different. It's totally like Microsoft has a very robust feedback community and system. I think in every product now, even Windows, somewhere in Windows, on the Windows 10, there's a feedback feature where you can just feed back to them what's working, what's not working. So anyways, we're kind of in a rat hole about feedback, but it's important. If you're managing a business, or you're involved in a business, or you're using software, or if you're using software as an end user, or using software as a business manager, I can't stress enough that how important the constructive feedback. I see in the communities, all the communities I'm in, and the reviews, and I may have even left a few myself that are a little scathing at times, and maybe a little less productive. Although I would submit that all of my feedback, I try to get somebody's attention and say, this is really not working.
Right. Yeah. I mean, think about how important that is from obviously a product development standpoint, but financially, you're going to hire all these developers to basically guess what the consumer wants. You're going to hire all these market research and analysts and focus groups and all this kind of stuff. When you can, draw a line through a huge portion of that just by asking the customer what they want. I mean, it's so obvious, but
right.
But it's crazy to think about it that way. It's like to hire a whole fleet of developers to just kind of bumble around and say, well, I think they'd like this, or I think this would sell well.
Well, back then if we're going to stay with software development, for example, in the 80s, computers were new, so it was really niche. So the developers were their own hobbyists. So they saw a piece of equipment that could do something, and then their own natural interest led them to start programming for this piece of equipment. And then companies would form because more or less it was hobbyists taking interest in the same subject matter, and they would coalesce into a company and then start selling their product. And that's how that started. So they were solving problems that the genesis of the problem was their own desire, you know.
Yeah,
But now
absolutely.
now software is so ubiquitous. Software surrounds us. It's on our phones, it's on our cars, it's on our refrigerators in some cases, so it's just the ubiquity of software. It just, I think, is so far beyond being a hobbyist thing now. I mean, you just, you run, everything runs on software. So
Sure.
you now have non-hobbyists that are, general users that are using this software, and, having a feedback mechanism so that this feature's not working simply, or like, man, like I could really leverage your product more if it could do this or it could do that, and having a feedback loop is so important. Like I said, coming back to the restaurant, like I always fantasize about running a restaurant. I don't know why. I know it's one of the riskiest business. I like food. My wife's a big foodie. Our family, we're just foodies, so we like to go out, we like to have a dining experience. And yeah, it always boggles the mind that the manager, the on-call manager doesn't touch every table at least once before they leave, personally asking for a feedback card. What do you like on the menu? What don't you like on the menu? What do you wish was on the menu? How was service? It just blows my mind. And I think it's probably easy to start a restaurant without a lot of professional, quote unquote, professional experience or business management experience. So that might be why that's not that's not present in the food service industry. But I don't know, maybe if you have a set menu, or your menu is curated by a talented chef, maybe do we just
Yeah,
have a
I have no interest in ever being in the restaurant business, but yeah, I mean the experience is important, and I do like that. I love when, especially if it's an owner. I mean, a night manager or whatever, walking around looking for feedback. But yeah, I think that's a nice touch. I would always, if I were to make one suggestion, that would be it. Even just people on the way out, or greeting them in the waiting room or something like that. If you're waiting for a table. Um, Waiting room like it's a doctor's office or something, but you know what I mean. you know
the thing with feedback is, and we're totally going, this is going to be the episode of feedback, but the thing with feedback is it's mutually beneficial to those who give it and those who receive it. If the ambition is to make a better product, right,
Mhm.
or to make the best product. I mean, I'm going to a restaurant because I presumably know or think that I'm going to enjoy this product. So I want to enjoy this product, right? And then and then on the business ownership or leadership side, you're in business because you want to keep inducing that transaction. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you give feedback, you're investing in your next future experience, which you want to be a positive one. And if you're soliciting feedback, you are giving yourself an opportunity to optimize your product.
Right. And there really is nothing more frustrating than a product that's almost perfect, or an experience
Oh,
that's almost, you'd almost rather have something be a total disaster so you
I
can
agree
just
with you so
draw a
much.
line through it and move on. But when you get like
Right.
that, that perfect article of clothing that's like, oh, I
I
wish
agree.
this was just, whatever. But yeah, that is
That
pretty
is that
frustrating when you're almost perfect.
that defines basically my whole entire ethos. My wife will laugh out loud when she hears you say that, because that's basically me. Like everything I look at, I can't help but look at it with an optimizing eye, from consumer electronics to software to, experiences we have out in public. So anyways, we didn't even get to touch on the news. Do we
Oh,
do
I
we
know.
dare? Do we
Yeah,
dare? Or you want to try to put a
I think
bow
we
on this
should.
around an hour?
No, I don't think we probably shouldn't go much longer into feedback, or all our feedback won't be good. So the only feedback we're going to get is you guys talk too much about feedback. Um, yeah, I think there was some interesting stuff that we flipped into our flip board. So I think that's worth taking a look at.
What's okay? So for the viewers out there who may still be with us, Brian and I curate a Flipboard magazine. If you go to flipboard.com and find finance and technology insights, you'll see I guess they call it a magazine, where Brian and I pin news articles that we find interesting or relevant, or some extra content that we can rely on in the event that we sit here and just end up staring at each other, which fortunately doesn't end up being the case, does it? We just talked for 50 minutes on feedback.
Yeah. And I would have no idea if we did it again, it'd be 100% different probably.
I agree. And that's kind of why that's why I love this format of just, we can talk about anything we want. But anyways, I'll go ahead.
Yeah. So it was funny. I went over to flip in an article that I saw on Bentley going exclusively EVs by 2030. And the article that you had most recently flipped in was about GM and LG working on their battery factory. So I figure since we both flipped in pretty similar articles within the next 24 hours, it might be a good idea to talk a little bit about that. And I know you're the big battery guy, so I'll let you kick it off.
I would say I'm not a battery guy per se. The transportation industry is in a total upset right now. And I don't even know if the normals know it or not. If I were to go outside and talk to my neighbors about electric vehicles or the transportation industry at large, I would imagine that they don't even know what's going on. But yeah, but basically the auto industry, let's just simplify. The auto industry is in a total transition mode from internal combustion or gas burning, diesel burning engines to electric engines. Where are you? And I mean, you're a technologist too, I've come to find out, so I'm sure this doesn't come as a surprise to you, but how do you see that? How do you see do you have any idea of what external, what I call the normals do you think that anybody sees this coming? Like the normals, do you see the normals seeing this coming? I mean, the industry sees it coming now.
Yeah. Yeah. So initially my first reaction is, being a technologist, as you now acknowledge, which is great. But also being like a numbers guy, when you see these articles that say we're going full EV by 2030 or this, that still seems like so far away. It feels like that's like Jetsons or something. It's amazing how if they wrote those articles or made those press releases and said 2029, how much different a reaction people would get. At least in it's funny to think like that, but that's kind of where I am, because I see 2030 and it's like, yeah, whatever. And that's like 2029. It's like, I don't even know what year it is now. We might even be there already. I don't know. But
that's so funny.
So that's the way I look at that kind of stuff. So it's like, 2030 still feels like a long time away, even though it isn't, so that's my first reaction. And I agree that the normals aren't there yet. I mean, you mentioned electric vehicle. I mean, people are still thinking you're talking about the Prius or something. And that's still in people's mind that, I passed the Prius on the highway because I can't go above 55 on the merit, that I think people still think along those lines. I think what's going to be a big shift and seeing it now is the pickup truck market. Maybe living here in the Northeast, we don't have as full a grasp of that as maybe we should, like nationwide. But those obviously massive sellers, and people keep those trucks for a long time. I think if you can get that market to adopt into that, which those the pickup trucks are selling pretty well. I think that's going to be a huge crossover event, in my opinion, when you get the pickup trucks there.
Yeah. So the Ford F-150, for example, is the number one selling vehicle in America.
Yeah.
It's not the number one selling pickup truck. It's the number one selling vehicle. So it sells more F-150s than any other vehicle in the United States. And to boot, it is the number one selling pickup truck. So Ford, I mean, most people at this point, I guess, have probably caught wind that Ford has announced their electric version of their F-150. I think they made the official reveal in May of last year now. So this year they're coming to market with electric Ford F-150s that look like F-150s. It's kind of what they're kind of, don't know if they're staking, they're betting on they're betting on people wanting normal looking vehicles that are just electrified. Tesla has their announced pickup truck, which looks like you can get a paper cut if you stand too close to it. It's all this angularly looking thing. It seems to be polarizing. You either love it or hate it. GM just announced their pickup truck a couple weeks ago, and it looks a lot like their Avalanche, which is kind of like a unibody. Doesn't have a separate bed necessarily. It doesn't look like it's sitting on a frame. It looks like a unibody kind of thing like that. I think it was the Avalanche, and the Honda, what was the Honda equivalent of that? Actually looks to me more,
Was it the
Ridgeline? Yeah, to me it looks more like the Ridgeline
Mm-hmm.
than necessarily the Avalanche. But so yeah, the electrification of pickup trucks are coming. One of the big things with an electric pickup truck will be, a lot of people buy pickup trucks and they don't necessarily use it for moving or pulling things. But for those who do move and pull things with pickup trucks, towing with electric vehicles is a huge problem for range. So the range drops off pretty precipitously when you're pulling things. Interestingly, and we're not really touching necessarily on the articles you touched on, but the the company that makes Streamline, those campers called Streamline or the Airstream?
Yep.
I think Airstream, I think they're called, right? So they last week announced a what's the prototype? They announced a prototype of a Streamline camper that has its own battery bank in it. And it's kind of like, duh. It's kind of a duh moment. Like, of course, this is what was going to be necessary for kind of towing, the towing application with electric vehicles. Basically, the trailer has got to come with its own battery. And what's even more interesting with the Streamline prototype is that they put motors in the axles. So not only does the trailer have its own battery supply, but it also is going to have its own drive wheels. So if the trailers come with its own drive and power source, then you kind of solve that towing problem. It's kind of interesting because, now you can imagine trailers becoming a little more, a bit more complex in order to kind of satiate the towing function of transportation. But I think maybe in the long term, battery density is going to keep getting better and better. So I imagine at some point towing, that problem will kind of go out in a whimper once the battery densities go up in EVs. But
right, and as the solar panels increase in quality and efficiency, I mean, you're going to slap a couple solar panels on top of those things too, which will help a little bit. I thought when you were talking about the axles, I thought you were going to go the other way and say, well, we've got these idle wheels spinning, being pulled by the truck. Why don't we use them to recharge the battery? But I'm sure smarter people have figured out that it's better off to have the battery in there and use that to propel everybody forward.
All the physicists that are listening to our show just spit their coffee out when hearing you say that, because adding a generator to the drive wheel or the drag wheels of the trailer completely negates the energy you're using to pull it.
Right.
So, but interestingly enough, with the electric vehicles, they do regenerative braking. So, if you can drive up a hill with an EV and you're going down the backside of it, you can reclaim a lot of the energy that you use to get up to the top of the hill. So it's pretty interesting technology.
Yeah.
So yeah, Bentley, your article that you posted was Bentley from CNBC, titled Bentley to invest 3.4 billion to exclusively offer EVs by 2030. Now, you mentioned kind of the ridiculousness of a company saying, in 10 years we'll be releasing all of this type of product. In a way, they may as well be saying in a million bajillion years we'll have it all sorted out. We'll have time travel sorted out in 10 years or something. But product development timelines for vehicles, I think they say is somewhere around 2 to 5 years. So if it's 2022 now, they're making the announcement now, you can see that it's not a total, you know, empty contribution to the necessarily, I guess. It's not a total empty claim. What is empty, in my opinion, is, last year before, the likes of GM was big on this. They would make announcements in the news cycle, and by 2040 we'll be all electric. By 2050 we'll be all electric. I mean, that's, those claims it was desperate attempts to pick up a headline and draw attention. The 2030 timelines are, I think, starting to become material. Interestingly enough, a lot of governments, countries, states are starting to signal, they've been for the past year or so or more, signal to the carbon industry, the gas and oil industry, that it's going to, like the UK, for example, off the top of my head, and I think even California and maybe Massachusetts, they've announced that they're going to outright ban the sale of new internal combustion vehicles by 2030. That's pretty telling. I mean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that is pretty telling. I don't think the ridiculousness of going to a 2030 timeline or anything. I just think it's funny that just reading that, the difference between saying 2030 and 2029, in my mind, it's such a big deal. That's what I was saying. No, I did.
Right. On sale $9.99.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Because the way my brain works, 2030 seems like it's 5 more years away than 2029. Seems like there's well, just mentally that jump.
That's akin to, I mean, we talked on it last week, for example, and it's again total geekery. But whenever you hear a company buying another company for $48.7 billion, or last week was Microsoft buying this huge video game company called Activision for, I think they were $68.7 billion, or it might have even been in our Flipboard with the number real quick. I don't know if I pinned it or not, but it was like they were like 1.4 billion short of the round 10. You know what I mean?
Right. I know.
So what's the calculus there? I mean, I know $1 billion is still $1 billion, but when you have that many billions, it does kind of become a rounding error, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And with the gas prices, that it's not $3.45 a gallon, it's $3.45.9. That whole thing is ridiculous. It's crazy that's still a thing.
That reminds me of tax. In the US, I think that I don't know if it's unique to us, but in the US, how whenever you go shopping, retail or something, and you always see the price not including tax.
Right.
A lot of places will say price plus tax, I guess. But I think in Europe, when you shop retail, I don't know if they statutorily have to, but I've read anecdotally that the price is the price. You tax included. It's kind of funny how things are like that. The psychology of commerce.
Oh my goodness, I know.
We'll save that for next week, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. The EV stuff. I mean, I'm excited about it. I'm curious to see how it all plays out. I think, like you said, the normals don't really understand how quickly it's coming. Just in the households, as far as the battery backups and things like that. So it'll be. I'm not sure how I feel about some of the states that are sort of regulating that and pushing it. I guess they kind of have to, because it's one of those things where you have to push that, because the consumer, you'd like to say let the consumer drive the process, but the consumer doesn't know what's available and know what's out there. So I guess it's all right for the government to take some sort of leadership there.
Yeah, I mean, I really try to not touch on the political stuff too publicly. It's like socially I'm a liberal, economically I'm a libertarian. I mean, I'm all over the place, things like that. I find, you know, if Elon Musk made a better product in Tesla in every way. And yes, they had incentives and they had subsidies and things, but there's definitely enough private capital that was being injected into that company to get them off the ground. Again, that's without any intimate knowledge of their finances, and I totally speak from on high, but electric vehicles, for example, and solar and wind power generation is better than burning dinosaur juice in every way. And I think all the emotion and fear surrounding that was all driven by the oil industry that had a financial interest in making it emotionally undesirable to put solar panels on your roof or batteries on your house. I just read that the price of solar panels have dropped 82% since 2010. And that's just from market response, and China's just going all in on solar and solar production, and it's just economics. So, the role of government in influencing markets, I'm not a big fan of, because I find it's like circling back to like the IT stuff, for example. The EU, the European Union, and the United States government, I think, ended up settling with Microsoft. But remember the whole big Netscape scandal that Microsoft had to go through, in the 90s, that Windows and computers didn't have web browsers. I mean, the web was just kind of emerging, and a little company called Netscape started, and they made a web browser, and they had a very profitable business making a web browser called Netscape, which later became Firefox, by the way. And in the 90s, Microsoft bundled Internet Explorer in Windows, and they called it anti-competitive. But now you wonder, could you imagine any computing device coming without a browser? I mean, if you want a browser, you need a browser to get a browser. You know what I mean? But the EU, like, they prosecuted this really expensive and public case, and lambasted Microsoft for being anti-competitive, and ultimately everybody forgot and just shrugged. It was kind of like a meh, so a lot of words to say, I think government kind of gets involved during the zeitgeist of a thing, thinking that they're doing positive work, which I get a lot. I don't think government agents, legislators rather, are necessarily bad actors. I think they're just kind of responding emotionally to their constituency and to the zeitgeist at the time. And I think if everybody just kind of calmed down, and in a lot of cases, kind of let the market kind of respond to the demand of the market, I think you would find that the outcome in a lot of cases would be the same. I mean, solar and wind is just cleaner and better energy generation. And the fantasy, I remember, the message was in the 90s, for example, you couldn't generate enough power out of solar. You'd have to cover the world with solar panels. Well, that turned out to be flatly false. And that was a talk track or talking point that was seeded by the oil industry. So did we need subsidies for solar to launch solar? I don't think we did. I think we just, once the consumers knew that it was a better product, and yes, the early adopters always pay the higher cost for the new technology and the early access to the product. But it always happens time and time again that early adopters kind of fund the development and signal to the manufacturing what the demand is. And then once a market is established and known, production follows, ramps up, supply increases to meet demand, price decreases. I mean, it's basic economics. So
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to Didn't mean to go on that rant.
No, that's all right. And when the government gets involved, just by their very nature, it's going to move slow. So when they get involved in technology type issues, by the time they wrap their hands around it, write legislation or do whatever, I mean, the issue's passed anyway. So it's
Exactly.
just by their nature.
The one thing I like government for is you can't dump your raw sewage there. You know, you can't put lead in your products. We know those things are, you know, don't get me started on the FDA and how inept or they are on our food supply. I mean, I keep reading articles that Europe has long banned many of the food colorings and preservatives that are still deeply entrenched in our food supply, you know, because they just know it's bad for you.
Oh yeah. Go to Google and put in 10 products that are banned in the EU, but available in the US.
Exactly. That's probably the exact article I've read kind of every year.
Yeah, right. That the slideshow we've all clicked through. But all right, that's probably a good spot to end here. You want to do your little commercial, let people know what you do and where to find you?
Yeah, so I'm Eric, CEO of EVERNET Consulting. We are America's #1 IT company. If you own or manage or influence a business and you need consulting or support, give us a call, 860-656-7810, or I prefer evernetco.com.
Right, thank you. And I am Brian Williams from Northshire Consulting, which is a investment advisory firm. We work with small businesses to start or improve their retirement plan, and also with families looking to get their household finances in order. Social media wise, we go by 401k and beyond. That's our handle for YouTube and our Facebook group, which are growing pretty well. We're happy with that. Traditional methods, northshireconsulting.com. Phone number is 800-498-1876. And that's a wrap.
Thanks,
Episode
Brian.
7 in the books.
Yeah, number 7.
Yep. And as always, your feedback is welcome.
Feedback, the episode of feedback.